Hey everybody, welcome to the Morning Devo with Beau. Hope you guys are well and ready to read. I know that sounds boring, right? Ready to read. Well, you can listen if you want. That would be cool too. I'm going to be in Genesis 19, and my name is Beau Willette. And I always tend to just read through the Bible in my devotions. I don't have my phone on me, by the way, so I couldn't tag anybody or get you guys in. I hope that, something popped up on your screen or something like that. So, anyway, I can't see who's there, but hello, everybody, and welcome to this morning Devo with me, Beau Willette. And I love to just go through the Bible. I know it's not like rocket science, but I find many online Bible videos kind of boring. That they always have these debates and da 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 da, and this topic and that topic, and I don't know. I just don't get into that too much. I'd rather just myself personally just read the Bible and kind of see what it says. Get familiar with it. And, the Bible is made up of many books. So there's a lot of books to get familiar with. And if you just listen to someone else kind of talk about it instead of just read it, you're probably not going to learn much, or you'll just learn kind of little focus points, if you will. It's almost like just watching a trailer instead of just going to the movie. Right? Watching the movie. Instead, you're just stuck on the trailers. And boy, there are a lot of trailers, Okay, let's get into chapter 19. I hope you guys are enjoying going through Genesis. It's super fun. Okay, this is a famous chapter right here. So we're going to get into it. Ooh, I might have to sneeze. Oh, every now and then this happens where I got to sneeze and I'm like online and I'm like, oh, is this going to happen? My allergies creep up. And it's definitely allergy season out here. So let's see. Is it going to happen? Am I going to sneeze? Yes or no? Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to happen. Okay, so hopefully you got your Bible open, Genesis 19. If not, you can listen. It says, that evening, the two angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. So hopefully you remember what happened yesterday in our reading. And I'm not going to go into all that because it's a devotion. I'm not just going to backtrack every day, right? You're going to have to kind of know where we're at. But they came to the city of Sodom, and it says Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. It's interesting that Abraham went running after the angels and the Lord on the planet in a body. Right? There was two angels, and then one of them was God in human flesh hanging out with them. This isn't the first appearance of God in human flesh, because we saw on page 3 of the Bible, God was on the planet walking in the midst of the garden. Yeah, so God can certainly have a body, and this isn't beyond God. If your God can't have a body on the planet, then obviously God cannot be fully glorified on the planet. You're going to have to glorify something else, like a human being, a prophet, priest, or king, or some politician, or some university person. You'll think they're the best. But it's interesting. The God of the Bible is going to get glory on the planet by visiting the planet, and in heaven where he dwells. Even it says the heavens declare the glory of God. God is going to get glory in all places too. Pretty cool. In heaven, everywhere, in the universe, and even on the planet. But you see Lot, dude, he's like, he's kind of just sitting. And it says, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. But it's a little in contrast, right, to Abraham, who went booking after him and said, oh my gosh, like, I am so stoked you're here. And made a feast, right? Prepared a feast, bowed, humbled himself, worshipped at the feet of the Lord and had an amazing conversation with God about Sodom and Gomorrah. And it says, then he welcomed them and bowed his face to the ground. My lords, he said, come to my home to wash your feet and be my guest for the night. Oh, okay. So Lot does kind of get it. He does get it in the sense of he's sitting, but he does go about the business of, hey, paying, if you will, the obeisance, the honor of these angels and washing the feet of the travelers, if you will. I just find it interesting that he's just sitting down, right? I hope I'm not a guy who's just sitting down. I hope I'm a guy who's a little more like Abraham, kind of anticipating the work of God. But maybe Lot has a lot on his mind. But we see there's similar customs that Lot, of course, has from his family, washing of the feet, doing the right thing, paying, giving honor. And he says, may you get up early in the morning and be on your way again. And oh no, they replied, we'll just spend the night out here in the city square. So Lot is, sitting, and it seems like maybe at the city gate, and he's offering these people, a place to stay, to be hospitable. I hope I'm a hospitable person. Jesus talked about being hospitable. Who do you have in your house? Who have you been hospitable? What kind of hospitality do you show? Is it just the people that you like? Is it just the people that you are they're in the right social class? Do you have a social class, and we all have social classes, right? Some people are used to living, my parents passed away both in trailers, like a trailer park, or I guess that's what you would call it. Some people, that's a particular class, a particular amount of money people have, and they choose to live in that kind of thing, and maybe they have to. And then there's other people that are living way different, right? And that's their class. Everybody's got that kind of thing, but are you hospitable? Are you okay with people that are not in your crew, not in your class, not in your, your social circles? Or is your hospitality really just, it's just to the people in your crew, so to speak? And, Jesus talked about that. Yeah, anybody can love that. Anybody can love that person, but, maybe stepping out, maybe getting out of your situation. That's what's good about, again, helping the poor, getting out of your social area, getting into where the needy people are at, But here we see Lot saying, hey, you know what? I'll get you guys ready. And then, I'll be hospitable. He is hospitable. But let's see what happens. Oh, no, they replied, we'll just spend the night out here in the city square. But Lot insisted. So at last they went home with him. Lot prepared a feast for them, complete with fresh bread made without yeast, and they ate. But before they retired for the night, all the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. So it's interesting. Unleavened bread, right? Without yeast. And they ate. So they made matzah, right? And then they retire for the night. All the men of Sodom, it says, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. Man, this is kind of crazy. Young and old. How populated was the place? Probably not that populated as far as what we think of population. I'm from a place where there's, I think, 13 million people kind of in, that kind of surrounding SoCal area. And that's a lot of people. And, but California is a huge state. It's got a lot of people in it. And, sometimes when we think of population, that's what we're thinking of, like Phoenix, millions of people. We don't think of like 20,000 people being a lot of people. But back then, yeah, that's probably how it was. A lot, it was a lot of people to them, but they didn't live in LA. They didn't have, these places. Not yet, right? And so Lot prepares food for them, but people, men, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. And they shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out so we can have sex with them." So Lot stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind him. "Please, my brothers," he begged, "don't do such a wicked thing." Now, I find it fascinating that Lot felt like he could talk to such a mob, such a crew. Mobs are crazy. When people are in panic mode, they kind of go run wild. People do crazy things. You think like we all live like in a delusion, like we're all a little delusional in the sense that we kind of think that we're all very controlled people. But when something happens like an earthquake or a natural disaster or, something that's out of our control and on a large scale, and we experience a power that we can't quite articulate because we don't feel it. Meaning we don't feel it in a normal day-to-day kind of way. It's a very random act of power that the earth generates. And it blows your brain. Your brain goes a little fuzzy, goes tilty, right? You're not thinking right, and people aren't thinking right, and people are doing crazy stuff, and anything to survive, man. And it's in you, and it's in me, and you think you're not like that. You think you're going to be all great and everything like that, and but when it's chaotic, when there's a mob and there's fear in people's hearts, it can be, man, it's radical. I've gone through a very large earthquake, and I definitely have experienced that kind of chaos. But here Lot goes outside of his house and he says, "Hey, can I talk to you guys?" And sometimes you try to talk to the mob, but the mob ain't going to listen. Rationale is out, and sometimes in cultures too, people might read this and they go, "Wow, that sounds so crazy." But, there are cultures and there's subcultures where there are behaviors that develop in subcultures. And those behaviors can be very radical, and they can be extreme, and they can be kind of considered common within that culture, within that subculture. That is what we do. What do we do when a visitor comes? Maybe not everybody's got the hospitality, thing going on. I'm going to wash your feet. I'm going to make sure you're okay. I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'm going to da-da-da. No, maybe in some cultures, the idea is, what? Hey, you're new. And now let's do something, right? We want you to be a part of our culture and what we do. And what we do is this. We want you guys to come outside, and we want to, be intimate with you. That's what we do. And I know that's hard for, especially people maybe that, grew up in Kentucky or something. I don't know, Nebraska, that it would be kind of hard to kind of understand, right? They'd be like, what? But where I grew up, there's so many subcultures. There's all kinds of crazy subcultures, all kinds. and it's debauched as you can get. It's of every kind of debauchery that you can conjure up, in your mind. It's alive and kicking. And it's a part of a culture. That's why I call it a subculture. It's not the culture at large, but it's particular inner subcultures of a larger culture. And obviously, this is Sodom and Gomorrah. This is it. This is how they roll. And he says, they say, come outside. So Lot says to them, he shuts the door, and he's obviously had some kind of contact with these people before, and to be able to feel comfortable, to be able to go outside and try to talk them down. Most people, I think, would just, in a sight of a mob, would run, they wouldn't try to, if you will, have a conversation, understanding that it's already an irrational situation. You can't really use, you can't try to reason with people that are being unreasonable. But Lot gives it the old college try. Sometimes we give it the old college try, don't we? And it says, please, my brothers. And it's funny. It's like the New Testament says, flee youthful lust. Sometimes we try to reason with lust, right? Oh, maybe a little bit here, a little bit there, that kind of thing. We try to reason with things that really we shouldn't be reasoning with. We got to just go. Just kind of get away. And it says, please, my brothers, he begged, don't do such a wicked thing. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. So we get a detail into his daughters. His daughters have never been with a man. I don't know how old they are. What, 15? Years old? They're probably not super old. They're probably not super young, but they're able. And he says, let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish, but please leave these men alone, for they are my guests and under my protection. So there's this ancient hospitality that's supersedes, everything in Lot's mind. The worst thing that could happen is something happening to these special guests that Lot has shown hospitality to. And he says, you know what? Here's my 2 daughters. They're virgins. You can do what you want with them. But what do? They say, stand back. That's what the mob says. And it says, this fellow came to town as an outsider, and now he's acting like our judge. So you could see that there wasn't quite the partnership between Lot and with these people. It seems to be indicated in this sentence, and now he's acting like our judge. He's an outsider. That Lot wasn't really a part of this crew. And it says, we'll treat you far worse than those other men. And they lunged toward Lot to break down the door. So Lot wasn't subjected to their behavior, it sounds like, at all. But at this point, they've had enough of Lot. And maybe Lot was a different kind of cat. I would imagine hanging out with Abraham, understanding the call of God in his life. There was some differences with Lot than the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And after a while, they just didn't want to deal with this Lot dude anymore. They didn't like him. They certainly didn't like him judging, their behavior. Doesn't that sound so familiar? Like sometimes, we might say, hey, no. But someone, doesn't like your no. And they want to do what they want to do. And they don't like you judging their behavior, right? And then they get mad. And then it turns to violence, right? And people get so upset Their hearts get so cut. I know mine did. Why did I cuss at Christians? Why would I swear at Christians? They didn't do nothing to me. It's not like they came at me or, came into my house and, or did anything rude or wrong or anything like that. Why did I was so hostile? Why did I have this hate in me? When I think about it, I kind of go, wow, it always comes back to, I didn't want to deal with what I did. I didn't want to deal with guilt. I didn't want to deal with any shame. I didn't want to deal with behaviors that I did wrong. And instead of dealing with those behaviors, I hung out with crews that affirmed what I wanted to do. Doesn't that sound a lot like Sodom and Gomorrah? People that want to hang out with crews that affirm what they do. That's what you do. That's what kids do. They go to college, right? They go to college and they start wanting to do particular behaviors. They've had it in their mind for quite some time, but now that they're away from mommy and daddy, they can go do it. And then they go do it, and then they find people that affirm the behavior, right? And we have great names for it nowadays. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of comical, actually. But it's always been around, but now they have letters, LGB, but, go down the list, right? But they've always been around. Everybody wants to find a particular Sodom and Gomorrah, a group, a culture that can affirm their behavior. And it doesn't just happen, in, maybe the debauched part of town, the underground club. It happens in the wealthy and in the nice places too. In those nice communities that you're in. It happens in those places too. People find their own Sodom and Gomorrah, their own group to affirm their biases, their wants, their wishes, their desires, their lust, their greed, their envy, their strife, their more, money, greed, right? Oh yeah. We are all, unfortunately, like Sodom and Gomorrah. And we all, at some point, have hung out with people that just affirmed our behaviors. Instead of being like Lot and saying, no, we ain't going that direction. My crew was like, yeah, let's go that direction. Good job. Let's keep doing, ever since I was a kid, that's how it worked. Finding groups that affirm your rebellion. It's kind of crazy. Sometimes we look at Sodom and Gomorrah, we look at this story and we just want to judge, oh, it's them out there. Look at you. Look at me. Have I not done the same thing? Ugh. Yeah. And so we see that there's this hospitality that supersedes everything in Lot's mind. And don't do anything with these two messengers, right? Now the two angels reach out and they pull Lot into the house and bolted the door. Then they blinded all the men, young and old, who were at the door of the house. So they gave up trying to get inside. So a radical miracle takes place. These aren't your average people. And they definitely have, some kind of supernatural, some kind of interesting gift here. And this is definitely something that's needed in such a desperate situation. So they're all blinded. It says, meanwhile, the angels questioned Lot, do you have any other relatives here in the city? And they asked, or that's what they asked. And it says, get them out of this place, your sons-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone else for we are about to destroy this city completely. The outcry against this place is so great that it has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it. Man, the cries reached the Lord. Now, we just got done the book of Revelation, and we saw that this is very similar to that book, where there is a cry of those that have been martyred in the book of Revelation, waiting for their, in a sense, their vindication. In a sense, they're waiting for their, kind of those that have done them wrong to be judged. And here you kind of get that idea as well. And the outcry. What is the outcry of my life? What does it cry out? Does it cry out injustice? Does it cry out hate? Does it cry out envy, strife? What does God read about me? What does he hear, from me? It's crazy. The outcry against this place. Those people that cried out were abused, misused. What is the outcry? We have a lot of people outcrying about sexual abuse in our world. What is the outcry? Is there going to be justice? What is God hearing? Man, that's intense. So Lot rushed out to tell his daughter's fiancés, "Quick, get out of the city. The Lord is about to destroy it." But the young men thought he was only joking. That's weird. They thought he was only joking? Were they drinking? It sounds like a pretty panicked situation. The young men thought he was joking. Like, what were they? Were they on some kind of hashish or what? Not thinking right. Maybe so influenced by the culture of Sodom and Gomorrah that they're just not thinking right. Hey, judgment's going to come. Ha, ha, ha. I've done that before. Judgment's going to come, and you laugh it off. You're not serious about it at all. Why? Because you don't want to think about it. You don't want to think what that means for you. And you could tell that these people, the fiancés of these women, these daughters, were not good guys. And they were caught up in the world. They were caught up, had too many anchors in the ground on this planet that they were just like, judgment? Yeah, right. How many of us on this planet are like that today? Judgment? Yeah, right. You think judgment's going to happen in this world? No way. They've been saying that forever. But the young men thought he was only joking. Crazy. And at dawn the next morning, the angels came insistent. "Hurry," they said to Lot. "Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here. Get out right now, or you will be swept away in the destruction of the city." And when Lot still hesitated, the angel seized his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and rushed them safely outside to the city, for the Lord was merciful. Man, merciful. What are you doing, Lot? Get out of there, right? Sometimes we are so enamored, right, with the things we have. We just are so blown away by it. Our eyes are just in the wrong spots. In the wrong areas. The eyes just keep wandering. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. Man, those things hit us. But the Lord was merciful to Lot. And it says, when they were safely out of the city, one of the angels ordered, "Run for your lives and don't look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains or you will be swept away." "Oh no, my Lord," Lot begged. "You have been so gracious to me and saved my life. And you have shown great kindness, but I cannot go to the mountains. Disaster would catch me up there, and I would die. I would soon die. See, there is a small village nearby. Please let me go there instead. Don't you see how small it is? Then my life will be saved." "All right," the angel said. Lot bartering with the angel about where to go. Very interesting, right? And it says, all right, the angel said, I will grant your request. I will not destroy the little village. Hurry up, escape to it. I can do nothing until you arrive there. This explains why the village was known as Zoar, which means little place. Lot reached the village just as the sun was rising over the horizon. Then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, I was reading in the book of Luke the other day, this passage. Jesus says, I have not come to bring bring fire on the earth. How I wish it were already kindled. I thought, whoa, that's crazy, right? Very interesting. That was Luke. That was chapter 12, verse 49. 12:49. Jesus was talking about that. Fire on the earth. And it says, he utterly destroyed them along with other cities and villages of the plain, wiping out all the people and every bit of visitation. The reason why I brought that up anyway is just because it says the Lord rained down fire. And here Jesus says, I have come to bring fire. I wonder who Jesus is, right? And it says, he utterly destroyed them along with the other cities and villages of the plain, wiping out all the people and every bit of vegetation. But Lot's wife looked back and as she was following behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. You know, just as the fiancés of these two girls were, very invested in the culture, so invested that they didn't really want God at all. And it's sad that Lot's wife was one that looked back too. Sometimes we tend to look back, right? And we tend to go, oh man, the old culture is so good. I was talking to a guy at the gym the other day, and it was kind of like that, the way back machine, And even though I think of friends and I think of, true friends and people, and there's a lot that I'm thankful for and, grateful for in the past, there is a lot to not look back on and just to look forward, to move forward in. Especially I think of the hate and the greed and the lust and the envy and the strife and the fear and the insecurities that reigned and ruled in me. And I don't want to go back to those things. I want to learn to walk in faith and to trust and to know that I'm secure in my Creator in those ways. I don't want to look back, to all those old emotions, those old feelings. And Abraham got up early that morning and hurried out of the place where he had stood in the Lord's presence. And he looked across the plain toward Sodom and Gomorrah and watched the columns of smoke rose from the cities like smoke from a furnace. But God had listened to Abraham's request and kept Lot safe, removing him from the disaster that engulfed the cities of the plain. Wow. What a story. Now, it says afterward, Lot left Zoar because he was afraid of the people there. Man, he was afraid of the people on the mountain too. And it says, so, man, Lot's got a lot of things going on in him emotionally. And he went to live in a cave in the mountains with his two daughters. This is weird. He doesn't want to go to the cave. He goes to the small town, He's afraid of the people, goes back to the mountain, and he's with his two daughters. And then one day the older daughter said to her sister, there are no men left anywhere in this entire area, so we can't get married like everyone else, and our father will soon be too old to have children. Come, let's get him drunk with wine, and we will have sex with him. That way we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night they got him drunk with wine, and the older daughter went in and had intercourse with her father, and he was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. For the next morning, the older daughter said to her younger sister, I had sex with our father last night. Let's get him drunk with wine again tonight, and you go in and have sex with him. That way we will preserve our family line through our father. So that night they got him drunk with wine again, and the younger daughter went in and had intercourse with him. As before, he was unaware of her lying down or getting up again. As a result, both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. When the older daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Moab. He became the ancestor of the nation known as the Moabites. When the younger daughter gave birth to a son, she named him Ben-Ami. He became the ancestor of the nation known as the Ammonites. So we're going to see the Moabites and the Ammonites, man, are going to be in conflict with the descendants of Isaac, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob fame. And this is how they came to be. Now we read this and we go, man, this is a mind-boggler. But, once again, it just depends on where you're from and kind of, the people that you've been around in your life. What I find fascinating about this is kind of the alcohol consumption of Lot. I think most people miss out on this when they go over this story. They're so, for some reason, enamored by the sexual part of it that they forget about the emotional part of it. Lot is afraid. Lot is a guy who is fearful. He's just an incredible mob of people that were interested in raping. So that's pretty radical, right? And they, massive, just all kinds of crazy behavior. And then he flees and he doesn't want to go to the mountain. He's afraid of going to the mountain. He goes to the small town. He's afraid of the people there. He goes back to the mountain and he's probably afraid. He's probably living in tons of fear. Again, most people have not gone through this, meaning a lot of people don't realize the kind of trauma that people go through. Like there's people that go through war and difficulty and incredible violence and incredible things that you're not aware of, and you think you'd maybe do something different, but you wouldn't, because you're a human being and you will fall apart under such circumstance. It's very difficult to hold it together. And, when you read the testimonies of, you listen to the testimonies of those in the October 7th attack on Israel, you read about the survivors and, just what they went through. And it's hard for us to grasp, but the amount of fear and insecurity, you can't quantify that. You can't put it under a microscope, right? You can't test it. How much fear, how much anxiety could you, but just, you imagine it, it would just blow your mind, right? It would make your mind go tilt. Your body would be affected by such anxiety and stress and fear and insecurity. And what does Lot do? Man, he drinks. He goes to wine, right? They give him wine and he is all about it. He's not saying no, hold on, hey, that's enough. I'm feeling a little tipsy. No, Lot is like a blackout drunk. That's the only way I could kind of understand this section of scripture. Because Lot is functioning. I've drunk enough. I mean, I kind of know the deal, just so you guys know. And, when you get drunk, you're not functioning. I don't know if that makes sense. Your body can't function right. When you're jacked on alcohol, you've drunk a lot of alcohol, you can't really be too. It's very difficult to be intimate. Sometimes you can drink so much alcohol where you can't be intimate. It's an impossibility. You're a drop down drunk. But then there's people that black out. They literally have no remembrance of what they did, though they function. That's interesting. Maybe that's what Lot is experiencing, and that's what we're getting from this passage. is a person who is blacked out. A blackout doesn't mean that they're dropped down drunk. That's not what that means. A blackout is a moment where you are functioning. You talking, your body is functioning fine, you're doing things, but you don't remember a single thing. It's like you weren't even there. And boy, I experienced my first blackout that I could remember in the 6th or 7th grade. 6th or 7th grade, I went to a concert and I was functioning supposedly. Everybody was telling me I was functioning then, later that night, but I don't remember a 2.5, 3 hour chunk, like none of it. Though they tell me what I was doing and what I did and everything like that, I snapped out of it, and they thought I was still like okay, but in my brain I didn't know what was going. I didn't know what happened. I didn't know where did I lose? How did I lose the hours, the prior hours? Where did they go? What did I do? And yeah. So I started young with this kind of reaction, if you will, to alcohol. Very scary, right? But that's what makes sense to me, is Lot blacked out. And he had this kind of reaction where he would be functioning, because you have to function in order to get someone pregnant. There has to be some function to your body. Wow, what a real passage of scripture that deals with our hearts on so many levels, right? Wanting to be part of a culture that affirms our behavior. When it's, it's wrong, but we want people to say it's right. So we're going to find people. We see that here, but we also see that sometimes fear and insecurity can get us so much that we can get a hold of substances. And those substances, sure, they'll block out everything, all the feelings. But man, there's some incredible ramifications. Moabites, Ammonites, that are the result. Wowee. So man, what a section of scripture. Man, mind-boggler, for sure. A lot of stuff, good stuff to study, a lot of stuff to think about just personally. Okay, you guys have a good day. Take care, okay? Bye-bye.